Guillermo Aquino, my friend and long-term mentor, work with you in business, work with you all over the place. We've had such a great relationship over the years. I'm glad that we could be able to meet today and talk about a couple of things, a lot of topics that are kind of heavy on my mind. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. This is exciting.
Good, good, good. So, you being a IT cybersecurity company yourself, you have a lot of different customers, a lot of different things that you are into as far as technology is concerned. I have a big question, and my question is, why should people consider using a managed service provider?
Well, that's a very big question. It goes into understanding IT and security, um, and understanding all the facets that go around IT. Um, as an individual, when you're a business owner, you don't understand everything regarding these different fields, and you may hire somebody and you find the best person, best candidate possible, and they may be good at doing desktop support or maybe even a little server and get your company operational. But when you look at it, that's all they know. They know desktop support, and they know how to get maybe install a printer on a server and maybe do some backups. But when you talk about IT and security, it's broad. It's so large. There's an aspect in every little section of it. You have to understand networks. You have to understand, again, servers. You have to understand disaster recovery, understand security, and then know how to understand security outside of just the IT. You have to understand security in your cloud. So it gets you're paying for what you get, but you're not getting the full thing. You're not getting the full security that is required to run a business nowadays. So that's the difference between hiring somebody and getting an MSP. MSP is going to give you the full landscape.
That's really good. I like how you sort of put that because I think a lot of companies nowadays, we've seen it in our experience as well, where you're in this sort of budgetary constraint, right? And you say, you're starting a company or your company is well established. You have an office, you have all these things, you have an accounting department, you have all these different departments. And now you get down to, well, how many headcount do you need this year for IT? Or for your security program or whatever the case may be. And you're thinking about the insurmountable amount of work that's ahead of you, right? Like I have to make sure, as you mentioned, like I have a data security plan, like someone needs to make sure, people are supported, right? People need to make sure that the network is secure, like all these different things. And it seems to me that most people are in this sort of budgetary constraint and they may be able to get one senior person and like a mid-level person and then like a couple junior people and that's it. And then those four people have to run an entire IT department, right? And it becomes really really like difficult. So maybe I think you've been on both sides of the field there where you are the person that that is the go-to senior person inside of an organization that has to do all these projects and you don't have enough support, and then now you're on the other side as an MSP. And I guess if this is a big thing especially with technical individuals because they kind of be like, we don't want an MSP, we don't want an MSP. But if you could speak to yourself as that senior engineer, what would you tell yourself now that you're an MSP?
Well, I would say hire MSP. Easiest thing said, because being a senior engineer, you become you get into a situation, you become a vendor manager, and now
Mm.
you're dealing with a ton of vendors, and vendors they're not invested in you. They don't care as much. They're in and out. They got a ton of other people, and vendors are even stretched further than MSPs. And they're good at what they do, that one little section. And then sometimes vendors, there'll be the argument between vendors, like this vendor said it's their fault. This other vendor said it's their fault, and you can never nail down what is the actual issue between and when you're doing a project, and it becomes a nightmare when on a project. Say you have a Cisco router and you're working with a Palo Alto, a firewall, and you're working, with VMware, and now you got to now all the vendors are blaming each other. No, it's the way this person set that up. So you have to have somebody that takes ownership of the problem, and gets you through everything. And as a senior engineer, of course, from that aspect, you're that person, and a lot of times it's a vendor management nightmare. That's what I
Mm.
can tell you.
So I guess final word on this segment is hire MSP.
Yes,
Save yourself the long nights and hire an MSP.
yes.
Okay, all right. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So now we talked a little bit, maybe switching gears here a little bit. We talked a lot about hiring an MSP and the benefits of an MSP versus having a full staff, different things like that, and even a hybrid model, right? Which I think you sort of alluded to at the tail end of the last segment. Now, when we talk about maybe your journey, right? I know, we worked together, several years, but kind of looking back at the journey even to get into IT, right? From like knowing nothing, right? Not even knowing, what a patch cable is or anything like that, all the way to a CEO giving talks about data security and all these things. Like, tell me a little bit about your journey.
Well, I mean, it goes so far back, all the way back to when I was about 12 years old, actually.
Mm,
And one day, so my dad worked for the government, and he wanted to get me going in the right direction in any career or anything, just introduce things to me, and he was always like that. So one day he brings home an Apple IIe. I
mm,
don't know where he got it. Don't didn't I don't know what deal he created or anything. He came home with the Apple IIe computer, first
mhm.
computer I ever owned, and he gave it to me. Said, learn how to use this. He didn't really know how to use it. He just he just gave it to me. So after a while, I would get little games like Pac-Man and different things to that extent, and it'll be on a floppy 5 1/4 drive, and you had two of those drives, and then eventually he came home and said, "Hey, I got you CompuServe. That's the internet."
Mhm,
So the internet was very limited at the time. I had
mhm.
connection. I mean, there was a web browser, and it was I forget the name of the web browser, but it had an Earth on it. It slips my mind. It was so far long ago, and a lot of it you actually use terminal to connect to the internet as well.
Mm,
So that's how far back it was. And
wow.
I learned different things. I would get different games, and it was just about games for me. Get into
Mm,
games, and eventually I said, man, how does this thing work? And I took it apart, took the machine apart, and I was amazed. I saw all these little parts, hard drive, and I mean the machine was huge.
mhm,
Um, and as time went on, I was into other things, and as time went on, I got good at that, but I tried other things. I tried being a firefighter, tried going into paramedic school, tried doing all this other stuff, but I never thought about computers until one of my friends had took a land class, and he got a really good job out of it. And that kind of woke me up. Said, you know what, I'm already good at that. So
mm,
kind of is already a fit. So I decided to take some classes, and before you know it, I was in junior college taking classes. I was in certification programs. Graduated, got my first job as a technical writer.
mm,
Stayed there for about 6 months. Went from there and started doing contracts, and from contracts, and it seemed like every contract paid more leading
mm,
up to Y2K.
mhm.
Year 2000, everybody was scared about Y2K. So I became one of those techs that ran around with the BIOS disk and flashing everybody's BIOS. Worked at IBM for a few years doing that, and got to meet some of the people that worked with Bill Gates, meet some of the
Wow.
people that worked with a lot of the originators,
Mm.
and I mean, there was one person that made a big impression on me. I took my BIOS update to him, and he rewrote the code on it. He said, "Man, I see some errors on this," and he
Mm.
just rewrote the code, and I used that, and everybody started copying my disk on how to do the BIOS update, and we started using that disk as the BIOS update.
Right.
And that kind of stuff kind of stuck with me. And then I met an actual another technician that actually rewrote the registry on a computer where the programs weren't even installed, but it pointed to another computer's exe, and the programs were launching on the computer. And that was like,
Wow.
and this is before all that virtualization stuff started coming
Yeah.
out and everything else. And she started sharing stuff that was just unbelievable. And I was like, man, how does she know all this? And it kind of blew my mind. And I just started picking up stuff from technicians and being in the industry, contract after contract. And that was my greatest teacher, is technicians and
Mm.
experience. I just kept learning and kept learning. And I would just make friends with I would find the best tech in that organization, and I would sit with them and learn and learn and learn. And over time, I mean, between IBM, Kaiser, Biorad, all these different companies, over time, I had a whole. I still know these individuals to today,
Right.
and I just ended up building a repertoire of tools and knowledge from them.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I developed my skill set as well in going into certain companies, and then I ended up managing actual data centers, being the management when virtualization kicked off. We would manage 200-300 servers, with
Mm.
using VMware, using backup data centers, using tools like Kaseya, learning management tools,
Mm-hmm.
Kaseya, Big Fix, SMS. There was a lot of different tools that you could use in to manage systems, and then getting into scripting and managing everything else. And then I ended up buying my own system. I went and bought my own instance of my own management tool. And over
Mm-hmm.
time, I formed a company, and I started taking on small organizations, helping them, providing those same tools. And over time, it just grew. I had
Mm.
friends and family, they would come to me with companies, and before you know it, I was already a CEO, but I was doing both,
Mm-hmm.
CEO slash working at a big, larger organization. And eventually, my organization grew to the point where I had to leave
Wow.
and do this full time.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, that's how everything started, and that's pretty much my journey.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. It's cool to kind of think how every time someone sort of makes this transition, or they get on the journey, right? I just call it just the journey, the IT journey. Um, they don't generally know how it starts, but it's generally some sort of piqued interest somewhere. And it kind of seems similar to you, when you say you were younger and your dad brings home this computer and it's like, learn it, like, and you're like, sure, right? Like, no problem, gonna figure it out, right? And then
Yeah,
going from there, you keep putting forth that effort, but really it's just because it's such an interest. It's not even like you're wasting time, right? It's like, oh yeah, like eventually this is gonna be something really cool, and I want to play games. It turned into I want to play games to, man, like how did you launch that application? Like what's that, right?
right.
So it seems like for everybody, and I share the same sentiment. Uh, it's one of those situations where you start with a peaked interest, you keep pursuing that interest, and then you kind of be able to, over time, you mature that interest, right? And I think
Yeah.
same thing happened to me. There was a academy in the 8th grade that they were piloting, called a Media Production Academy at my school, and I joined it. I was like, okay, let's kind of see how this all plays out. This is sort of a different sort of thing. I'm not used to this. But the cool thing about it was we learned web development. We learned, things about computers, all these things. By the time I got in high school, I ran with it, right? I think, I attribute, even working at Contra Costa County, being able to be an intern at such a young age over the summer, being able to go in and learn about the IT and back then it was a lot of you know, deploying applications and answering help desk tickets. And I was like, this is interesting because I knew, you know, the social aspect of it was cool to me, right? Like I just go to somebody, like I get to talk to different people every day. They have different problems. I fix it. I'm the hero. Yay, right? Like everything seems pretty cool to me, right? Didn't know it was so many issues behind the scenes as far as, you know, all the things you have to wrangle and manage and different things like that. And really, you were the first individual who gave me my start, right? This is why it's such a cool thing hearing your story, and then knowing that you, through your journey, you spring loaded my journey. And so
Mhm.
I remember, I think, man, several years ago, a lot of years ago now, there was a project for a client that you had, and
Mhm.
you had to overhaul like a new office. You needed some help. You needed to move the network. You needed, I mean, it was going to be all night. And you were like, hey, man, I came to you and said, you know, I'm interested. I'm trying to get into IT. I'm trying to do all this stuff. He's like, okay, all right, if you're interested, I'm going to pick you up. We going to go work. So everyone, everyone always says, you know, they look at now you're a CEO. They look at, you know, now I'm a CEO. I'm working in different avenues as well, engineering, but it always starts somewhere, right? It always starts, you have to have an interest, and then you have to kind of go through that phase. Maybe it's a period of months, years, whatever it is, where you got to put in hard work. You have to learn things, you have to be a sponge, and then you can start beginning to implement the things you learn, and then you mature that, and then that kind of becomes a career. And so
Mm.
it's, I mean, I think this segment has been really good about the journey. Any kind of last sort of thoughts on anyone who may be starting their journey or maybe get going, or, you know, not knowing if they want to get in or get out or whatever the case might be? Anything you want to add to everyone listening?
Well, the thing that you said about hard work, you know, the thing I noticed most through the journey, to me, it wasn't work. It was I was having fun. I
Mm,
enjoyed I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much. I would get lost in it, and at
mm,
times I would have to get pulled out. You know, my parents or different ones. You know, hey, you're spending too much time on that thing, or you working on
yeah.
the computer too much, or hey, you know, you got other responsibilities.
Right, right.
So it was so much fun to me finding out ways to write a script that deployed Office through a whole organization, or
Right.
create some code that modified this setting on all the computers or servers, or you know, just crazy stuff, you know, and
Hmm.
I was addicted.
Right.
I enjoyed myself. So that's what helped me get through the learning curve and everything else. Because if you don't really enjoy what you do,
Mm,
it becomes hard to actually become really good at it.
very
So
true.
that's kind of one of the things I would leave with you. You have to really enjoy it, and once you do that, it would become a natural thing, a natural progression, and eventually, it's not something forced. It would just snowball into something big.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's sound wisdom. Sound wisdom. So as we kind of think about this and we think about this journey, and we talked a little bit about sort of being in these office environments, right? We're helping customers, we're working for organizations, right? And as we've alluded to, you know, even in your journey, right? Naturally, so you went from, like you said, working in on flashing people's bios, right? To like
Mhm.
talking about, is your data secure in the cloud, right? So we've now made this paradigm shift, if I could say that, from the office to the cloud, right? I love using that term, right? We are no longer, and then even more so, we're no longer in the cloud, we're in space. That's my mantra right now, because we have far exceeded, right, like the expectations of the cloud. We're no longer in the atmosphere of the cloud, we are beyond the cloud, we are like in space right now. And so now let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the need for IT, right? Because now that everything has made a transition, right? You're not in, any longer kind of having, MDF, IDF and different floors, and you're, patching these networks together, and you got all these servers and all these different things. You're now in this environment where everyone's like, oh, just throw that in AWS, throw that in Azure, throw that in GCP. Yeah, launch those servers. Yeah, just launch about 10 servers, right? Launching 10 servers was an individual walking around with a cart with a rack and racking 10 servers, right?
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. So let's talk a little bit about this evolution from the office to the cloud.
Well, it's definitely so the evolution is definitely real. When you look at it nowadays, you can apply for a job, or 10 years ago, it would be all data center this. Now it's all AWS. Now it's all Azure. Now it's all, all everything cloud based. And you have
Mm-hmm.
to know a little coding as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just IT is shifted. It's no longer the server local, and some of it is. There's still some of that. There's some people that are just still having trouble to adopt, and that eventually they'll get there. But IT has definitely moved to the cloud, but that raises a whole other set of skills now. A whole
Mm-hmm.
nother, it's no longer just fixing a computer, which you're still going to have that. It's where is your infrastructure at? Where is
Right.
how does your infrastructure, how does your data, how do you scale your data now? How do you scale your infrastructure? How do you build that application? How do you manage all that stuff? So the skill set has definitely changed. What I would say that the whole thing of being in the cloud is, there's now a whole new risk, and that's kind
Right.
of how I look at it. Whereas you had somebody physically that had to come to your environment and physically do certain things, but now
Mm-hmm.
it's more scarier in far as the risk, the appetite for risk now that you're looking at is everything is public. Everything
Right.
is in the cloud. Everything,
Mm-hmm.
you need a whole nother type of technician to deal with
Right.
this. You're talking about you're going to have to train your staff. Your staff has to be a lot wiser now on how they do
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and the way the team is, and that's where it hasn't caught up yet. Where I
Right.
see different offices, they're still thinking everything is local the way they work. They're still
Mm-hmm.
using the same password for everything. They're still not considering that their information is public. It's just now on
Right.
the deep web. Everything is
Mm-hmm.
is behind a password.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's the world has definitely changed, and we're now what I would call we're in a technology dependent age. Whereas before we wasn't so dependent, and now with COVID and everything that's happened, we are completely dependent on technology. You can see it with us doing Zoom. You can see with companies having to keep moving through a pandemic, how we're attached to the cloud. There's no way
Mm-hmm.
around it. And the
That's very true.
technician, the technician has changed. The
Mm-hmm.
whole way you do support has changed. So that's what I would say regarding the cloud.
That's really good what you added about technology dependent, and you mentioned something about having individuals who have a skill set in the cloud, right? And that's something where you see like this sort of mass exodus where people's titles are changing from IT something to cloud something, right? Or to security something, right? The focuses have changed, right? The priorities have changed. Where your infrastructure is, where your data is where where you want your people, right? And so it seems to me, um, there's a question I often get asked, and I know you get asked this too. People say, why is data security important, right? Everything's in the cloud. I'm good, right? I don't need anything else, right? I'm good. Like people say, excuse me. People may say, I have a Mac. I have a Mac now. I'm great. I'm good, right? I don't need virus protection. I don't need anything. I don't need nobody to support me. Mac does it all, right? The same sort of thing is happening with the cloud. People are like, look, I don't know anything, but I know this. I go to EC2 and I hit launch instance, you can't tell me nothing. Put a public IP on it, I open up the ports to the world, I can get to it, and it's easy, right? And that one sentence was so many different security no-nos, right? So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, right? This notion that I'm in the cloud now, I'm good, I don't have to worry about data security, I don't have to worry about anything pertaining to what's going on with my data. Now that it's in the cloud, it's secure. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are how that is the most craziest thing in the world. I mean, it really is. I mean, I deal with a lot of firms that, that statement is made, and I have to try. I have to hold myself back and try to explain it in a way where, it's, it's very caring and understanding where their position is, because
Mhm.
I've seen things like Office 365 get hacked so much. Everybody
Right.
say, "Oh, my data's in OneDrive," or, my email. I go through Office 365.
Mhm.
The stuff is not configured correctly. They don't have
Right.
DKIM. They don't have email security set up. They don't have the right DNS records set up. Not only that, maybe one of their, and because they're in the cloud, they stop securing their endpoint. So they said,
Mm.
"Oh, my data's there. I just sign in. I can sign in anywhere." And so
Right.
a lot of that has to do with our society and the way we market. When we
Mhm.
market, you're in the cloud, we market that, we use those type of terms. Oh, you're safe, you're in the cloud, or your data's not here no more. You don't have no worries. That's to get you to buy, but that's not
Right.
reality.
Mhm.
Reality is Microsoft doesn't back up their stuff for you. They don't
Yeah.
take care of your email. It's a co-managed environment. They
Right.
when you used to back up your Exchange server, there was a reason you backed up your Exchange server. There was a
Right.
reason behind that. Now
Mhm.
it's in the cloud. Oh, I don't need a now you for some reason you don't think you need to back up your Exchange server. It still
Mm.
is just in the cloud, but you
Right.
still need to apply the same principles. You still have to back up your data up there. You still have to back up your SharePoint. Microsoft is
Mhm.
not gonna magically come and do a restore, or and people are finding out now over time that have been in the cloud over some time. They've had cloud disasters,
Right.
where they've lost data, where they can't retrieve a mailbox, different things to that extent, because they had no backups. They
Mhm.
didn't take like I said, the skill has changed, but the still need is there. You still have to do data backups. You still have to do
Right.
data protections. You still have to apply data security. All that stuff still exists,
Mhm.
because they're not taking the ownership of your data.
Right.
They're not going to do everything that you would do as an organization. And they don't know your organization's compliance needs. Some
Right.
organizations are required to have data for 10 years. Some data
Mhm.
organizations are required to have certain data securities in place. They're just going to provide a basic platform for you, and you have to do the
Right.
rest. So that's where the
Right.
technician comes in. And like I said, the skills have changed. So,
Mhm.
and then it's on the biggest thing is now it's accessible.
Yeah.
They're just a prompt away of getting access to your mailbox. They're
That's very
just a
true.
username and password away. So the security there has to be on point as well. So that's kind of what I would lead to, and I just I don't like the idea of it's almost like I don't want to know. I
Right.
don't want to know the real reality of what is going on. Oh yeah, my data's in the cloud. I just don't. I want to stay ignorant. I don't
Mhm.
really
Right.
want to know what's going on, because I
Right.
feel good with it saying it's in the cloud and someone else is taking care of it. But you got to
Mhm.
really understand the reality. They're not taking care of you like you think they are.
Yeah.
You got to really dig in and understand. It requires more education because it's
That's
in the
good.
cloud. Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. And I think there's something I wanted to add to what you mentioned, which is AWS, Azure, GCP. They all have this notion, and this is very universal, called the shared responsibility model.
Yeah.
In the shared responsibility model, um, it's the cloud provider's way of protecting themselves, and it's their way of informing you what you need to do, right? And they make a
Yeah.
clear line. I think anyone listening to this will probably understand what I'm talking about. There's a good diagram they have. It's a line right through the middle, and it says what we take care of, what you're responsible for. And essentially, they're saying if something happens and you experience a loss of data or anything according to that nature, if you submit a support ticket, they could just send you back this picture and say, sorry, your case has been closed, right? So it's amazing. I tell a lot of individuals too, the same things you were concerned about on premise, you need to be concerned about in the cloud. Now, the cloud has given us an ability to be very elastic. It's given us the ability to be global very quickly, to have redundancy. But there similar there's a good friend of ours named Nick, and Nick always says this statement: computers only do what you tell it to do. I can hear his voice right now. Did you tell it to do that? If you told it to do that, that's what it's going to do, right? And the same thing goes with the cloud, right? People may kind of be confused as to why their data was accessible. Like, why was this not encrypted? Like, well, every platform encrypts differently. Some platforms will encrypt your OS drives and your data drives automatically. Some won't, right? Some you have to be very specific. Like, do you want this encrypted, and how do you want it encrypted, right? And then even more so, a lot of the cloud environments, people may put a virtual machine up, and they think, okay, this is great. I just put a public IP on it. I, give myself accessibility from the internet. And they don't think like, yeah, but everyone else in the world, all they have to do is just scan the open internet. who has port 22 open, right? Oh, another box. Let me try to see what I can do. Let me try to brute force my way in, right? But a lot of things, it comes down to the design. Like you mentioned, it's a change in kind of how we do things, right? Like there has to be people that tell you and maybe can give you a form of consulting that says, hey, this is the right way to do it. This is how you go about it, right? Because it is different. It's not like the usual way we're used to doing things with a firewall, with a router, and all these different things. It's now software defined. It's now in a cloud environment, and these cloud providers are providing you infrastructure, compute, storage, all this stuff. And then they're telling you once you get it, what you do with it is on you. Now they have some rules like, don't try to like do forex mining and cryptocurrency, but that's different. But on the other end, it's up to you what you do with it. And I think this kind of leads us to our next segment, which we talk a lot about, Guillermo. We have conversations about this all the time, is the securing the supply chain, right? Most attacks or most data loss or most things, it doesn't just happen from one vendor. Now, there are cases where that does, where it's just one vendor, something goes bad. It's just like, you just have to kind of fight through that one. But most times, companies have a supply chain of vendors, and they all have configurations for security different with each vendor. And what tends to happen is you might be good from vendor 1 through 2, 1 through 3, but 4 and 5 have some misconfigurations, or 4 and 5 you ignore it. Oh, that's just this that does that. But you don't think that these systems all tie together somehow, right, for your business to operate. So I know you deal with a lot of companies, and tell me a little bit about what you kind of tell them when it comes to securing their supply chain. And one last thing I will add too, I think that's kind of what happened with some recent attacks too, even with FireEye and different some of these other companies. They were supply chain attacks, right? Like vendor A plus vendor B, both having a certain level of access, being able to, create this big sort of issue because two different systems were kind of connected together. And then it created a bigger issue for everyone else, downstream. So maybe if you can kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, supply chain is definitely one of those things near and dear to me. Um, the reason the reason is when you deal some well, deals with a lot of accounting firms, and when you deal with them, you talk about securing their endpoint, their device, and these firms kind of deal with the crown jewel of all data, financial
Mm,
information. Um, and some of them they do some of the strangest things. First off, to even have a supply chain, you really need a good process in place.
mm,
They're receiving intaking data all kinds of different ways. Text message, email, Dropbox, OneDrive. It's just, and people send um driver's license, 1099s, W-2s, all this financial information, all kinds of different ways. And it's kind of drives you crazy because you're trying to secure them. So we talk about supply chain, you're talking about your whole list of vendors you deal with, and securing those vendors and how you intake data and how you give the data back to the customer in this
mm,
instance. And you have to have a secure way you give data, and you have to lock everybody down to using a certain process.
mm,
This is the process we receive data. This is the process we send data.
mhm,
Um, with that being said, you have things like Dropbox. Is that a good way for you to exchange data? I mean, giving
right,
them a link, send the data there and have it in Dropbox. Well, Dropbox has been, compromised a few times, and
mhm,
there's different other ones that have been compromised. So you have to kind of look at different ways you exchange data, how you secure those cloud providers, and how it goes into process, and then it goes into what we call good vendor audit.
mm,
You want to do a good vendor audit on these type of firms and understanding how they're exchanging data, because you have to uncover all the weeds when it comes to this to really secure somebody. Because just securing the endpoint, I can have all the virus protection and DNS security, all that, and even email security and a good firewall, but you over here getting compromised over here on Dropbox or
right,
OneDrive.
mhm,
So none of that means anything. Your leak is out there in the cloud.
right,
So securing the whole supply chain, how important that is, it's so important. And
mhm,
understanding your whole business environment, because your business
mm.
environment now is public. So
That's really good, and I think you started touching on a point that was kind of dovetail to another segment, which is really more focused around these accounting firms, right? Which is sort of uh, a a niche market for managed tech because managed tech has a lot of experience with accounting firms. To me, why is it so important? And why is the IRS even putting a big sort of price tag, or I would say a big sort of requirement on these accounting firms to even have security? Like, what have you been seeing sort of in the market? I guess through your discovery with accounting firms and their need for data security plans and different things like that.
So data security, they were required to have it. I mean, just it's being enforced.
Hmm.
The IRS is now requiring all accounting firms, it's the law, to have a data security plan, and this is based off a GLBA,
Hmm.
Graham Leach Bliley Act of 1999. This act is to protect consumer data, because what's happening now is a lot of consumers are having identity theft through tax
Hmm.
firms or through accounting firms. Because these
Hmm.
firms, I've walked in many firms and they don't even have firewalls in place. They don't even have some of the basic securities that you would need in place. Forget about their supply chain. We're just talking about just generalized virus protection.
Right.
They're using Windows Defender and the stuff that comes default on Windows. They're just not thinking that way. So the
Hmm.
IRS saw that, and they're making it required. They have to check just to renew their license. The IRS puts a statement in there to renew their tax license. where they are required, they understand the requirements of security that is applied to their firm, that they have to have
Mm.
in their firm, and they check the box. So now the IRS is saying, now you're liable.
Wow.
You check the box, you understand, to get this
Hmm.
license to operate, you can lose your e-file now. You can get penalized. And if a accounting firm were to lose their e-file, I mean, that's huge.
Right.
I have to now send it via mail. And
Yeah.
then there's penalties. There's monetary penalties for the firm.
Hmm.
So it's very serious because identity theft is huge.
Mm.
It's This is where this is where the new crime is happening. All the
Right.
crime now is happening in the cloud. I mean, you're using the same passwords on your firm, and then now that you use your same password that you used on uh LinkedIn got
Hmm.
breached not too long ago. Okay, well, I know you're an accounting firm, let me try that password. Oh, I got access to your QuickBooks. Oh,
Wow.
I'm access to your QuickBooks. Your QuickBooks is online.
Hmm.
So some of the accounting software is online, like Lacert. There's a lot of ones, ATX, and then some other accounting firms. There's such a target because the
Mm.
word accounting, and you're advertising your accounting, you're advertising you're
Right.
doing tax. If
Hmm.
if you get hacked, there goes 300 people's financial information. Well,
Mm.
that's a gold mine for a
Right.
hacker. Not
Hmm.
only is it a gold mine, they just hack one firm and they're set for life.
Right.
They're set for life. They don't have to do anything else. They did one crime and now they're done. They're set for
Hmm.
life. So it's real critical for these firms to actually take it very seriously, because they're dealing with people's information and people's lives, really, when they're ingesting this type of financial information.
Wow, that was really good. And I think too, I know you place a big sort of um priority on drive encryption even. I know you have certain things you do all the way to the phone. Yeah, I know a lot of the things that you've shared with me, even with assisting a lot of your clients, and making sure that, like, if someone gets a hold of something, physically gets a hold of something, even, right, it turns into a brick. You can't
Yeah.
do anything. Can you talk a little bit about some of that and why that's important, drive encryption?
So driver encryption is actually one of the requirements the IRS puts on these firms, and is totally necessary. They so This is the thing again about the cloud. These firms ingest that information. Maybe their application they're using is cloud based, and maybe that's secure, but they're leaving fingerprints everywhere on that device. Like, they're bringing in that information via email, but they're downloading in their downloads folder, and their downloads
Mm,
folder has a ridiculous amount of 1099s and um, not only that, W-2s. I mean, all that financial information. That information were to get out, or if they were to lose their laptop without drive encryption, you know how easy it is to get that data. You pop the drive
right,
out, put it in another computer, you have access to everything.
right.
So that drive encryption is critical to put a layer of security there, where if they were to lose their laptop, even we have geofencing on the drive encryption. So
Mhm.
if they were to go out of state, if they were go outside of the United States, the laptop, it would automatically encrypt all that data,
Mm,
if need be. And then, of course, it will let us know where that data is, as well as USB drives. We
mm.
can intelligently see where the USB drives are and encrypt them, as well as the phones. So
Wow.
we put that kind of security in place just to protect the firm,
Mhm.
and protect the client's information. I'm very passionate about it because I've seen what happens to these type of firms. Um, Actually going into a situation, and I've seen a firm just basically almost go out of business,
Wow.
completely out of business, and literally just from and being the backups being encrypted and hijacked, and all the data being hijacked and encrypted. There's nothing they can. There's all You're at the mercy of the ransomware person, or you're at the mercy of the person that did this to you, and you just have to try to pick up the pieces the best you can. So
Mm,
seeing those different things, it kind of gives you the seriousness, and it gives you
right.
the you approach it very, very seriously. Even if the business owner doesn't approach it very seriously, you have to educate them. Hey, you can lose your firm if we don't do this. We gotta do
Right.
this. I know it costs a little bit more, but this is what you have to do. Um,
Hmm.
and I try to educate them as much as possible. But when you deal with accounting firms, you deal with CPAs, they know how to watch every penny, and
Right.
I mean, they are geniuses at the dollar, and
Hmm.
they want to know every little thing, and that's why I'm glad they like that, are like that to a certain extent, because they see the value. They see the value. If they lose their firm, they
Right.
see,
Right.
oh, this costs me way more. So they see that. So it's easier to interpret, okay, you may spend a little more now, but you're not going to be in those percentages of firms that go under because of ransomware or someone hacker stealing your information. So
Right.
yeah.
No, that's good. And I think that goes kind of back to our first segment where we talked about, why should you use a managed service provider, right? Like imagine
Hmm.
if you're an accounting owner, owner of an accounting firm, and you had to do all this yourself, right? Like, oh my goodness, right? We are in for trouble, right? So just all these things that you kind of have to think about. That's why we say, using a managed service provider, there's a benefit to it, right?
Hmm.
And then even some people may say the dollar. Well, you can find good firms that can be able to do things. ManagedTEK, right? You guys do a great job of being affordable, very, very fair with pricing as well. So it's like, it's a really big thing to sort of consider. Now, as a like final segment, right, before we sign off the podcast today, we if anyone knows, we know about this threat landscape we're in, right? And it's now become so huge that we have news reporters reporting on. I mean, it's 7 in the morning, you're sipping a cup of coffee, you turn on the news, hackers get into the CIA and uncover thousands of files, right? Like they say all these different, nation states have hacked this and this and that. And then they put a guy with the hoodie and it's dark in
Hmm.
the room with the computer, right? And so they sensationalized hacking, threat actors, the deep web, and your data was on the dark web, and all this stuff. And I'll tell you this right now. I've worked with hackers. These are people with flip flops, a button down shirt, and like
Hmm.
a dad hat, right, a truck hat. Like they're common people you walk right by every day, right? Very very good at what they do. There is a thing out here just for education for those who are watching. There is a such thing as being a hacker and not being a bad hacker, right? There are different types of hackers, right? There's they call them black hat hackers, which act on their own. They're generally very nefarious, kind of want to do their own sort of activity, and it's generally for a purpose. So there are hacking groups out there. I won't name them because I don't want to be a target, but there are hacking groups out there that are very popular, and for any sort of reason, whether political, whether social, whether for any sort of reasoning that they feel is appropriate based on the things happening, they attack people, right? And so you kind of look at that sort of world we're living in, but you have good hackers too. You have people that hack for charity. There's people that hack to protect. No, no, no. Hacking for
I
charity is the
know.
thing. There's people that protect. It's kind of sad when you read it when hospitals are hit with ransomware, and you're sitting here and you're like, "Are you serious?" But that just goes to show there's two different sides, right? But in this threat landscape, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. The news has sensationalized this stuff. I mean, it placed fear, right? Security companies, they are selling fear, right? You're gonna get hacked, ransomware, hackers, right? And you
Hmm.
think it's like this person, like, and it's not generally how you think it is. The threat is real, but there are practices, there are things you can do in today's landscape to keep yourself secure, to keep yourself at best, to do your best, right? Some people, if you're really a target, they're gonna get you either way. But if you're just a common everyday consumer, or you're in the office, or in your personal life, there are things you can do to secure yourself. You don't have to be a sitting duck, right? You don't have to be a person that's like, you see somebody, you're like, here's my password, right? Like, there are things you can do. There are ways you can protect yourself, right? And even more so in today's threat landscape, you have to think about this too. There's another common thing, which if anyone knows me, they know I love talking about this. Social engineering. Social engineering is the most beautiful form of hacking I've ever seen in my entire life, right? There's an individual I used to work with by proxy. She advised for the same organization that I worked for. Her name is Rachel Toback. Rachel Toback is probably one of the, if not most prominent social engineers I've ever seen in my life. She's been featured on CNN, featured on all these different news outlets. And I actually met her at Black Hat a couple years ago. Interesting thought was that she showed us in a live session, her taking an individual's name. She put a crying baby on, right, in the background. YouTube just on a loop, baby crying. She calls a telephone company, I believe it was AT&T, calls them, says, "Hey, oh my God, my husband, I can't find him, but I need my phone changed, and the baby, oh my God, no, don't do that," right? She is in this sort of act, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was able to change his phone number, kick him off the plan as the owner, and buy a new phone.
Yep.
Social engineering. So a lot of times we're so concerned about someone's gonna hack me, get my password, take all my money out of my bank account. Could happen. But the other thing is the people that you think, which is a little scary, the person you're at the grocery store, they say, "Hey, you have any kids? Like, where's your parents from?" Different things like that. These are questions that could be security questions that you can answer
Mm-hmm.
to get into
Yeah.
someone's account. These are just random things. You don't
Yeah.
realize people could be socially engineering you. It doesn't, and there's no sort of demographic to be like, this person looks like a hacker. They could be like the coolest person. They're very approachable. So I know I kind of gave a lot on that, but that's something I'm really passionate about. But tell me what your thoughts are on this sort of threat landscape and kind of how we're now in this different world with hackers, ransomware, deep web, threat actors, social engineers. Like, tell me your thoughts on this.
Well, there's a lot of thoughts on this. There is, like you said, there's different types of hackers. There's even people. I think you didn't mention the ethical hacker. They do it
Right.
for as a
Mm-hmm.
living. But there's different levels of hackers. There's even people that don't even know how to hack, but they're getting access to tools to
Yeah.
hack. So and they're being successful. So it's not even how good you are on a computer anymore. Nowadays, hackers have built white labeled ransomware. You just go to the
Yeah.
dark web, you could buy and start your own ransomware. Buy a white label ransomware, go get a logo, put it on there, and
Yeah.
make your own thing, and now go ransomware somebody, and just sit there and collect. I mean,
Yep.
they make it very easy now. So it's not even about almost technical skills. It's just this is the new age we live in. and
Right.
and and you in this age, you have people that are really really good at, I mean, they don't need no one creating no ransomware for them. They don't need a lot. They just
Mm-hmm.
they just need a terminal session, and
Yeah.
you're done. You're done. You're
Right.
fried. Your whole life is gone. Then you got other people that, they just, you know what, I just want to get some money. I
Yeah.
mean, I see it, all
Right.
these people, trillions and trillions of dollars on the dark web, and
Mm-hmm.
just give me a half a percent,
Right.
so, they go on the dark web and they find a place where they could buy, a white label ransomware toolkit. And before
Mm-hmm.
you know it, they go and do it, and they'll show you how to do it. And there you off, and you starting to make a little money.
Yeah.
So the game is huge. And
Yeah.
like I say, it's a game. It's
Yeah.
it's 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 crazy because these guys, they don't, their moral compass is a little different. They're
Mm-hmm.
not looking at, oh, am I tearing somebody's life up? That's why companies are such more of a target versus a
Mm.
person. When you deal with people's moral compass, they rather think about, oh, the company got insurance.
Right.
The company, they could all go get a different job, even if I
Mm-hmm.
if I bring down this company.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't feel then there's people that just don't care. They'll
Right.
they'll 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 take your identity, they'll take your whole life from you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's serious, and what can you do about it? I deal with lawyers at times, and sometimes well, I'm gonna sue them. I'm like, really? They're in Russia.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're in Russia. Are you gonna really sue them? You know, uh, uh, then I deal with a person say, I'm gonna call the FBI. Okay, they're in Iran.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to really do that? How are you going to
Yeah.
really get your money back? Oh, and
Right.
then they use cryptocurrency, and not only do
Yeah.
they do that, they tumble it, so you can't
Mm-hmm.
figure out where it came from. Cryptocurrency is untrackable almost. So
Mm-hmm.
it's 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 something you have to prepare for. This is the world we
Mm-hmm.
live in. We're in a digital age. You have to, and it's not even someone targeting you. They just have tools.
Right.
They point their tools at Comcast. Say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take out Northern California Comcast. I'm gonna point my tool, and it just starts scanning through IPs, and it finds an open door. Oh, my doors are open. I never took it seriously. I'm in. I get what I get, and
Mm-hmm.
some people get breached and don't even know it. And those are the
Wow.
scary ones.
Yeah.
Those are the scary ones. If you know about it, you could do something about it. You can get, your virus protections picking it up. Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. You're in good shape. When you get breached and you don't even know about it, they done took all your addresses. They're in your mailbox. They're forwarding your mail, and you're an accounting firm. You got wire instructions. You got banking information. You don't even know about it. 6 months later, they done requested wires from your friends, and I mean from other clients, and
Mm-hmm.
they're pulling money from you. You don't even know it.
Right.
So things like that, that's real. I
Yeah.
see that
No,
stuff
that's
I see it all the time. So and a lot of times you're not equipped as a business owner to deal with that.
right.
You need somebody to come in and help you,
Right.
and to come in and start putting security in place, and even just to do a security audit on your
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure, vendor audit. Like I said, securing the whole supply chain is important. And then of
Right.
course, then you have the ones that when you deal with social engineering, I think that's the most genius thing in the I just don't, the case you're talking about, the pressure that was on the guy on the phone, I almost felt bad for him. He was just getting
Yeah.
totally scammed. He was under pressure. He was sitting there like, what do I do? What I do? The baby's crying, he's answering the
Yeah.
phone, trying to help the lady, and for he gave her the keys to the kingdom. I
Mm-hmm.
remember that case, and that happens a lot. That
All right.
happens a lot. And then of course you got the phishing on phones, you got phone calls,
Mm-hmm.
phishing phone calls, you got phishing text messages from
Mm-hmm.
banks. It looks like it's from a
Yeah.
bank. It has a logo on it, it has my bank logo on it. How do they know I
Mm-hmm.
go bank there? And they're
Right.
asking, hey, someone did such and such. Can you please send me your password for your so we can change your password? And you go
Right.
click on the landing page and put in your you put in your bank code in there, and you pretend like you're changing your password, and then a couple of weeks later you go back to your bank and you wonder why your pin code's the same. It
Right.
hasn't changed. Your pin code's the same, and someone's using your pin code.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so it's serious. It's about
Yep.
educating,
Mm-hmm.
educate, and then some
Mm-hmm.
things you just can't educate fast enough. So you really need somebody just to do it for you.
Right.
So
That's
that's
true.
kind of what I would say. It's crazy nowadays. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
that's really that was really really good, especially that bank one, man. They get people with that one all the time.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that you did mention that in closing that I'll add to is that you mentioned about how people will buy things on the dark web to try to
Yeah.
to get ransomware kits. I will tell you this: these individuals, we call them script kiddies. These are individuals who will get a script and they will read the instructions on the README and they will just point and click it's like, I'm just pointing at anything I see. I don't know how this thing works. If I get you, I got you, right? Like, we're good, right? These are the most dangerous people because they don't even know the implications behind what they're doing. And then in addition, and I got to close on this because this is probably the funniest thing. We had a case, and I know you'll remember it. And of course, we'll just share the laugh on this one. We ran into a company that had got ransomware. And to add injury to insult, right? We're talking to the person and they're like, look, man, I'm a good guy. Like, I got kids. I just need a little extra money. And then, we're like, hey man, can we get the price down? Like the Bitcoin price keeps changing, right? and we're sitting here and he's requiring all this information. He's like, hey man, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry this happened. I would recommend y'all really work with the security for them. And then to make it worse, he said, yeah, and if you have any issues trying to kind of get the money, I have a support line you can call that'll help you. Oh man, I've never been the same since that. I was like, man, people making a business out of this. So it is funny, but it is not funny at the same time. Getting educated is important. Getting the right resources are important. Talking to people like Guillermo from ManagedTEK. Talk to me if you need help. Whatever you need, get with people who may have a great understanding on it, or get some education out there. There are a lot of resources out there. There'll be a lot of things we talk about in our podcast and other subsequent videos in the future. But Guillermo, I just want to say thank you for your time. As always, it's always a pleasure for us to get together and talk. Absolutely. This, of course, is episode 1 of many. But thank you for your time. Any last statements for the people before we go?
No, I'm excited to do this. I think this is going to be a great way to educate our customers, clients, and prospects, and people that just want to know more about security and how real it is, how real the threats are, and different things. So I think this is great.
Awesome. Well, that was Guillermo. I'm Marquise, and we will talk to you all later. Until then, stay safe, and then I hope everybody has a great day. See ya.